Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm James Milan, and this is the first DPCD update of 2021. I am here with Jennifer Raitt, the director of our Department of Planning and Community Development, DPCD. Jennifer, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, James, and ACMi,
Thank
and
you very
everybody in
much.
Arlington.
Yeah, let's hope for all of our sakes that the hopes that we do have for things getting better in this new year turn out to be well placed.
Yes.
Anyway, we actually, I think on the agenda today, will be talking about relief and relief specifically for small businesses from a couple of programs, one local and one state. So let's start with the local plan, which is as far as I understand it, it is a community development block grant that is meant to promote resiliency with small business. Would you tell us about it?
Absolutely. Yes. This is a $200,000 allocation from the CARES Act funding. So last year, through the CARES Act, the town of Arlington received a round of funding back in the summer, which we utilized, and then we received a second round of funding in the fall, which we've been utilizing as part of both relief to small businesses and then also some support to two town programs, which I can talk about. But I'm going to focus on the small business resiliency program. And so for that program, we set aside $200,000 to provide grants of up to $10,000, which are meant to be working capital grants, as well as technical assistance or both to small businesses that have 20 or fewer employees, which includes the owner, who are full-time equivalent employees, who can demonstrate that they've got a loss of income as a result of COVID-19. They must be a for-profit business, have been in operation for at least a year. We're looking to fund brick and mortar businesses, and of course, not businesses that we funded in the past. You can't double up. So the funds are actually available right now, and we have the application up online at COVID-19 assistance, which is basically just arlingtonma.gov/COVID-19 assistance. And when you go to the website, you can find the fillable form. You can download that form and print it out and mail it, or you can submit it online through an email. It's due by January 15th at noon. And the funding, we believe, will be awarded starting on February 1st through the end of the year. And we say that because it's basically a rolling application. We're going to be reviewing materials. And then depending upon how many applicants we have, we might continue to solicit applications throughout the course of the year. We also offer translation, interpretation assistance, or any other reasonable accommodations if they're needed. So I'm really excited about the program, really just because it's great that Arlington has access to these funds. And I think that also there's a number of businesses in our community that really could use this support. I realize it's small, but in one way, because it's only up to $10,000. But I think one key part of this resiliency program is meant to be for the long term, which is the provision of technical assistance. And depending upon how many businesses are interested in utilizing this, I think it could be an avenue to provide some long-term resiliency and support to the community.
So I've got a number of questions I got to say, but one of them is you said it's up to $10,000.
Yes.
What determines, how much of that an amount a business would get?
Well, I mean, some of it is really just going to be demonstrated by the business, and their true needs, and how much, what kinds of costs they actually have, and the whether or not those costs are actually allowable under the program. So that'll be kind of the first checkpoint. Based upon where we were at with the last funding program for small businesses, we really believe that $10,000 is really a stretch. Most of the grants might be a little bit less than that. So I think it will really just be, the whether or not they're actually fundable requests. That's part one. Part two is just sort of weighing the number of requests we might receive. And then the third one would be the urgency of the need, and the ability of that business to, if we think that that funding and support will keep that business, stable for some period of time. So, I mean, those are just a few of the determinations, but of course it also, would require that the business doesn't have any sort of tax liens or unpaid fees or any other sort of problems that might become obvious once we start actually reviewing the application. So a
Right.
lot goes into that determination.
Yeah. So,
Um,
and obviously they have to be in good standing is what I think you were saying there. And that
yeah,
makes sense.
in good standing with the town, but also with the state.
Hmm. What, I can't help but ignore, or I can't ignore, sorry, in the numbers that you've cited is the fact that you're talking about $200,000, you're talking about up to $10,000 in those grants. If you were to give, and I understand that that won't happen, the maximum to a number of businesses, that would add up to only 20. I am sure that with all of the conditions that you outlined for that the businesses would have to meet, there's still many more than that number
Right.
who would qualify or be in need. Um, how how do you see that playing out? Do you expect that this 200,000 can be um, distributed in such a way to have a relatively broad effect on the community?
Yeah, I mean, I think that will have a broad effect on the community. We'll also look towards some equitable, geographic distribution to the business community as well. We obviously have some experience doing this with the last round of applications for the other small business program. We want to make sure that we're touching as many businesses as possible. So that geographic distribution of funding would also be, necessary as well as equitable. But I do think that it's providing the right amount of support for now. However, if we think that there's going to be additional need or support, perhaps looking to other CDBG funds that we might have available if they're potentially being reprogrammed. Basically, sometimes every year we may have some additional small amounts of funding that could potentially be reprogrammed through a program amendment that has to be approved by both the select board as well as the US Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is where the funding comes from. And as long as it's a qualified expense and amendment, then that might be another opportunity to add funding. However, based upon the last round, I actually think that the $200,000 will be sufficient for where we're at right now, as well as because there are other sources of support that are becoming available, including other loan programs as well as the state's resiliency program.
Hmm. Which I think we'll touch on in just a minute.
Yeah.
And let me just ask you that you had mentioned that this is the second round of funding from
Mhm.
CARES Act funds. Um, and you said no double dipping. Does that mean that any business that received funding in the first round, they are disqualified from applying?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And the first round was limited to micro enterprises, which was 5 or fewer employees. So technically, they still would qualify for a small business grant because it's
Hmm.
20 or fewer employees. But if you've already received funding in the past, you would not be eligible for this grant.
Okay. And it's come up several times in our conversation already that this is going to be distributed through community development block grants. Um, I think everybody's familiar with that phrase, with that term. CDBG is also an acronym that we're familiar with. I myself am curious. In this case, it looks like funds are coming in from the feds and then being distributed through this program. Is that the general purpose of community development block grants, that they take funding that comes from some other source and figure out how to distribute it? Or are they do we also fund CDBGs themselves?
So the CDBG program is a program of HUD. And we are, as an entitlement community, we receive funding directly through the federal government, which is, of course, HUD. There are actually smaller communities that have, less needs. And by need, I mean the number of people who are low or moderate income, the number of residents who are over the age of 62 or older, the number of homes that have been built before 1939. These are some of the qualifiers for being an entitlement community, as well as population as a whole. So there's sort of demographics and population. which is how we became an entitlement community. Arlington has actually been an entitlement community since 1974, which is actually the inception, the day, when the program was created.
Mm-hmm.
Inception was what I was trying to say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the community has been, able to access funds through HUD since that time, and the community basically has to comply with CDBG, but sets up its own application process, sort of program activities, and all sorts of other things. The CARES Act funding has been sort of this new. Over the years, we've had a couple of instances, including the Great Recession, and there was actually another period in the 1990s where there were additional sort of disaster recovery funds that were granted to certain community development block grant recipients. And basically, it just comes in as additional funding for a specific type of activity or support. So that's what the CARES Act money is about. It's a very specific type of grant funding and source of support that can only be related to COVID-19. And nothing else, basically. However, our regular grant funding has a little bit more of a broader sort of brushstroke, and we apply that to sort of the range of programs like affordable housing, public facilities, infrastructure. That's not what COVID-19 is about, the CARES Act money.
Right. Excellent clarification. I appreciate it. Thank you
Yep.
very much. Let's move on then. Just before the holidays, I think, Governor Baker announced that there was going to be a small business relief fund set up, $670 million approximately, something like that. I assume some of that will be coming our way. I would just ask you to let us know what you know.
Absolutely. Yes. This was announced late last month, literally on December 28th, it became active. So it's very, was really just sort of popped into place over the holidays, and is something that's basically an opportunity directly from businesses to the Massachusetts Growth Capital Corporation. They're actually the entity that's coordinating the grant program, and it's called the Sector Specific Relief Grant Program. I'm sorry, it doesn't have a more catchy name.
That's right. Yet, yet
But
another catchy government, like label. It's crazy. Anyway.
it's quite the label. But it's a $668 million grant program, as you suggested. It provides grants of up to $75,000, which is capped at 3 months of operating expenses for small businesses. And it's sector specific because they're trying to prioritize which sectors actually get access to the funds. And so those priorities are categorized as restaurants, of course, being, really one of the most critical industries, but also indoor recreation and entertainment facilities like movie theaters and, sort of arcades and other places like that. Also, gyms and fitness studios, as well as like private instruction, personal services like nail salons and spas, hair salons, etc. Individual retailers, as well as event support organizations. So basically, those types of entities that sort of boost events that happen at those indoor entertainment facilities,
Hmm.
and other places like that. So those are sort of their grant priorities. If you're interested in learning more about that program, it's really just through the Mass Growth Capital Corporation. And they have a specific online application with all of the details, also notifying people of what is not allowed in terms of applications. It is quite similar to some of the CDBG guidelines that I was mentioning previously, including documented loss of business income, being in business for a certain for a certain period of time. It was actually beginning in 2019. And other sorts of requirements like that. So I think for learning more about that, it's best to go to the state's website to figure out if both if you qualify, and then also to ask some questions about the program. That program grant deadline is also on January 15th. So it is very important, if you are interested, to get in that queue, submit your application, and get your questions answered by the state.
Yeah, clear. Worth noting that the businesses that they're targeting there as particularly vulnerable or in need at this point there's big overlap, right, between those and the things that were most affected, the activities that were most affected, and the facilities that were most affected by our rollback, uh, recent rollback to a previous step in our recovery stage. So hopefully that is going to be, of use and of relief
Yes.
to ailing businesses. I know that the indoor recreational facilities you were mentioning definitely hurting, and so
Mhm.
let's hope for good news there. Um, you were saying where people could get more information around that, and that reminded me to ask you, where can people get more information about the local program, the CDBG program that we had been talking about before?
Yep, that's just at the arlingtonma.gov/COVID-19 assistance. And actually, if you go to that web page, you can also find a link directly to the state's Mass Growth Capital Corporation website about that sector specific relief grant. The other thing I didn't mention just quickly is that the state's grant program is actually funded by FY21 state capital or state operating funds, as well as CARES Act funding. So because they're utilizing CARES money, I think that that's why there's some overlap in terms of the requirements with CDBG as well as that funding source. So just quick note about that.
Very quickly, before we end, we've been talking here. We started the program off by saying, we want to be hopeful about what this year can bring to us in terms of a return to normalcy, and certainly our small businesses, as we know very well, have been among the most affected and decimated sectors of our economy and our society. Um, what can we do? Just remind us. We've talked about this before, but remind us what we can do to very directly support our own local businesses here in Arlington.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's really just this is the hardest thing. It's really changing your mindset if you haven't done this already, which is to shop Arlington first. So whenever you're thinking about shopping or engaging in some sort of activity or maybe a movie rental or watching some sort of, streaming something live, if there are local opportunities to do those things or go to, a yoga class or go to, go out to eat, any of those things that you can do in Arlington, and you can do them in Arlington, do that first. And so shopping Arlington first is really critical right now. It's critical because we want to keep that infrastructure in place and we want to eventually be able to enjoy it in the way that we've enjoyed it in the past, in person and celebrating and being out in the community again all together. And we won't be able to do that as easily if we don't continue to shop Arlington first now. And of course, hopefully that continues into the future. It's not just a temporary thing, but it's a good habit to practice now and maybe to set that intention for 2021 when you're thinking about shopping, to not think about you know uh, maybe a retailer that's easily accessible by an app
We
on your
shall go
phone,
nameless. Right?
an unnamed app. Um, but rather to find a way to do that in Arlington. And honestly, with the Shop Arlington First website that was created by the Arlington Chamber of Commerce and supported by the town, there are great ways to figure out how you can shop Arlington First and what you can do. And there are safe ways to do it too, which I think is important to most people in the community, is to figure out how I can do that safely. And speaking from personal experience, there's so many ways to do that without leaving your house. And to still feel good about supporting your local community. And it doesn't even have to be for you. It could be for somebody else in your community. It could be, a gift certificate. It could be, other means and ways to support the local business community. The other thing about the Shop Arlington First website is I think that there's a text application that allows you to get sort of updates about special offers and
Mm.
opportunities. So that's something to think about. And then the last thing I'll say about promoting the local business community is that if you had a great experience of shopping Arlington First, to share that with people you know and let them know that it was safe and easy and made you feel good and made them feel good too. So I think that those are those are the things that we can do right now and hopefully continue to do them in the future, um, to think about and care about Arlington.
As you say, those are vital and urgent right now and over these coming months, especially the winter months, but a good idea forever.
Forever.
Um,
Yes,
all right. Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Welcome again to 2021. We look forward to seeing you regularly through the course of the year.
Likewise.
And I have been speaking with Jennifer Raitt, who is the director of our Department of Planning and Community Development here in town for this DPCD update. I'm James Milan. Jennifer, we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Thank you for joining us.
See you soon. Thank you so much.